They are new every morning. How is Rob? Is he doing?
Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? Take heed that no man deceive you, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences. All these are the beginning of sorrows. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved.
How's everybody tonight? All right. Let's jump right into prayer. Father, in the name of Jesus, thank you for tonight. May your word, Lord, be a lamp, a light, the truth, as it shines in a dark place, as Peter told us. And Lord, we see these things happening. We're reminded of the words of our Lord, lift up your head. When these things begin to happen, your redemption draws near. And Lord, we're getting very close to the end, knowing, Lord God, that you, when you walked the Sea of Galilee, when you walked in the shores of the Sea of Galilee, Lord, the beginning of the end times was set upon us. But Lord, you've been so merciful. You've given, Lord, the nations 2,000 years to get right with you before you return. And so, Lord, I thank you that even though we've been in the last days, Lord, as John will tell us, the last hour, it's approaching us. So we thank you that we have your word and we have your truth so we can walk in this world, Lord, not in darkness, Lord, but in the light. And knowing things, Lord, help us to be proclaimers of your truth and be able to share with others and comfort others, Lord, as with the same comfort that we have received. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, obviously you guys have known about the Houston hurricane, Category 4, almost got to a Category 5. Some people would question exactly what it was, but it's all underwater. I wasn't in Houston, but I got within an hour and a half of Houston a couple of weeks ago, not knowing this would happen. But I seen some of the the areas of Houston, and this is what it's been looking like. This is what it looks like a couple of days ago. It still looks the same. Some of the streets, some of the things that normally would have been freeways, roadways, very dry areas, completely submerged underwater. And it's incredible. I was showing this to my wife today, and I said, look, the stop sign's about this high, and these people are just completely underwater. And it happens so quickly. Very, very similar to Katrina. And now we're moving into the area where it's going to hit Louisiana this week. It's so unusual. It actually went into, hovered over Houston, went back out, came back in, and it's now into the Louisiana area, right on the border between Texas and Louisiana. And then New Orleans, of course, will get hit. And, of course, you always try to think, you know, there's different ideas. Even in the Christian circles, you think about a couple of things. One, is this a judgment from the Lord? Two, is this the natural disasters and things that Jesus told us about? There'll be calamities. There'll be things that people will be so caught up in this world that they will not even realize that this is something of the Lord trying to get their attention as the birth pangs of the earth continue. It's really hard to tell, and I'm not going to sit here and say, this is it, this is it, this is it, as some people online would be, because it's difficult to say. However, I do know this. Starting Wednesday, tonight, into next Monday, it is Southern Decadence in Louisiana, New Orleans area. Katrina hit during this time. That was in 2008, I believe. No, 2004, sorry. 04 or 06, I forget. I think it was 04. Yeah. It's been a while since I just remember I didn't have as many kids as I do now, and because I was able to watch the news. And Harvey is gone back out to the ocean, coming back in, but this time it's heading right toward New Orleans. It's so powerful, and we have really we're so distant, right? We live in Southern California. It's bright and sunny. We have wonderful things, avocados and things like that. We forget how catastrophic this is. People are being told to write their social security number on their arms. So when they're found, they will be able to identify them because there's no guaranteed of what could actually, that they're going to survive this. I don't know what the death toll is right now in Houston. 20s, okay. It was 5 and then 12 and then it's yeah. And it's really bad. And I don't dismiss in any way whatsoever that the Lord God of Israel can bring judgment upon a city. He's done it before. I could read it in the scriptures. He's done it all through history. And again, there was no repentance from New Orleans, from the inhabitants of New Orleans since 2004. This thing has continued, the Mardi Gras, the Southern Decadence, which is a basically Sodom and Gomorrah back in 2017. And then yet we're experiencing this. What was one of the interesting things that happened, and this was, again, one of those things that I wish it didn't happen. I don't agree with the church. I don't agree with the pastor. I'm 100% diametrically opposed to Joel Osteen and what he teaches and how he teaches and what he teaches. However, I would have wished that he would open up the church doors right away for the people that needed help during the flooding. The church was closed. They just sent out a message saying that we're going to pray for everyone, but our church is underwater or flooding. Lo and behold, people started showing up to the place, and it wasn't flooded. And after the New York Times ran an article saying biggest church in Houston doesn't open doors, granted, it was New York Times. I'm not saying that they are impeccable, but these are non-believers pointing out, hey, the biggest church in Houston, what's going on? So, of course, they opened it up a day later, and now they are using it as a shelter. However, it's received tremendous amount of skepticism from people around it. This is what Christians do. All they want to do is pray, but they don't want to help. And I understand. I want to be realizing that these people are unbelievers and they're going to cast judgment and blame on any Christians, whether they do right or wrong. However, as Paul the Apostle will remind us that in regards to unbelievers and how we're viewed from the outside, we have to be above reproach. And there should not be any reason for a fellowship, unless there were some catastrophic reasons, that wouldn't be able to reach out to unbelievers in need. In fact, that's probably the greatest need, the greatest opportunity you would ever have. I'm going to tell you what exactly we would do, but our fellowship, as small as we are, unbelievably responsive to the needs of people. And what an opportunity. If anything, we fall short of the grace of God, but if anything, what an opportunity to just minister to people and sit with them and cry with them and pray with them and show them that Jesus is real despite the circumstances that they face. And all of its affluence and opulence, they didn't want to open their doors. People will get mad and say, why are you criticizing them? But that's the reality of it. I'm only explaining what they did and what they didn't do, but they did open the doors later. So Antifa, this has been happening, and I had a couple of friends of mine who were actually at the prayer rally at Berkeley. It was Monday. I believe it was Monday. That's right. They were interrupted by Antifa. They beat up some of the folks that were there. A couple of our friends were able to leave before it actually happened, but these are basically a terrorist group who is, without any restraint, being allowed to do whatever they want. Police was there, Berkeley police was there, and they allowed them to jump over the barricades, to attack. Some Christians, some were not Christians, some were. And I did have some of the videos, but we have some other videos. It will take too long. But they have called for, again, a summer of rage. We talked about that already last week. November 4th, a key date for them coming up in a few months. But they're also calling for property seizures, meaning that if they don't agree with you, if you have a wrong opinion, if you're a conservative, if you are of the wrong political ideology or spiritual ideology, they would call on the county and the state and the government to seize your property for being a fascist, a Nazi, and violence on police, basically an all-out revolution. We're seeing, now granted, I don't know why they're allowed to do it. There is a spiritual aspect there that we cannot dismiss. When things don't make sense on a logical level, it's really a spiritual level. What has been unleashed on our nation that you have complete anarchy and revolutionaries beating up whoever they don't agree with and calling out violence? It's really something out of a movie, but it doesn't make sense because Washington doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because our politicians don't make sense. And if we're not praying for our nation, if we're not praying for the political leaders, people in charge, something else has grabbed a hold of the U.S., and the state of the U.S. is much worse than it has been in a long time. I know the 60s and the rallies in the 60s, just studying them, understanding what happened. Some of you guys remember some of the anti-war rallies in Berkeley especially, but they were not to this extent. And the police did something about it, and even Plumbers Union did something about it. Really, they unleashed the Plumbers Union on a couple of revolutionaries back in the 60s. They didn't protest again. That's when people took up for themselves the right to bear arms. But this is violent. This is violent, and this is violent against Christian groups. Of course, they have labeled Christian groups such as what is that one that they're going to have a lawsuit pretty soon? But AFA, American Family Association. What was the other one from Washington, D.C.? I forget the name. Tony Perkins is the president of that one. I can't remember the name. Have been labeled fascist, anti-fascist, Nazi groups, conservative groups. These are some of the pictures from the rally in Berkeley. It's a serious thing. I'm not dismissing it in any way. I do know that the government could do something about it. I do know the police can do something about it, but for some reason, they have sat on their hands and done nothing. And so you begin to think about how much is this allowed, how much is this controlled, and how much is this wanting to create enough mayhem and chaos. Of course, they're being paid. They've already been found out that all these people are paid. They are contracted by different groups, including one of Obama's groups, Call to Action, George Soros groups. It continue on and on. It's a list and list of things that, and some of our politicians have been in favor of it. Finally, I think it was Nancy Pelosi today came out and said, this was wrong. It's been a while. But I wouldn't even start. But 2 years ago, Nancy Pelosi at Berkeley gave the speech that she was proud that there were revolutionaries at the campus in Berkeley. She was proud that there were revolutionaries in Berkeley. Well, what do you expect? Now she's calling them out, saying it's too violent. Hypocrites of hypocrisy of hypocrisy. This has been fomenting for a long time. Michelle Obama goes to different colleges, different black colleges, and says she's afraid in the U.S. because she's afraid of walking around on campus, see who someone's going to get her. And Jim Crow, it's been gone a long time ago. The Democrats who approve of the KKK and racism and slavery, they're crying out the loudest that we have racism in America, where they've been the party of racism for quite a long time. Now, they're creating something, especially in Philadelphia, big cities, where it's going to, they're going to be posting different conservative groups, Christian groups, churches on their website, calling for violence against those places. So websites, I think it's called It's Going Down. That's one of their websites. I'm not telling anybody to go on it. Or Submedia or Insurrection News have been promoting these groups, calling out their readers to donate for creating more pockets of resistance throughout the country. So this isn't going down anytime soon. And as we talked about it last week, and Daryl pointed it out as well, we're seeing the seeds that have been sown over the Obama administration over those 8 years, seeds of revolution, seeds of insurrection. And what we see is the sprouting up of persecution against people that don't agree with their Marxist ideologies, but especially conservatives. Obviously, Trump is a big target of that, but it'll spill over to other groups. They've already seen that, Christian groups, and they're anti-fascists. Anybody they consider a fascist, a Nazi, against LGBT, against homosexual marriage, are going to be addressed. The press release of some of these left media groups and websites, they're claiming that mosques are being bombed. There's no mosque being bombed. And the LGBTQ people are being battered all around the U.S. So they're raising and fomenting a large amount of people that are, just to use a sentence from Lenin. I don't usually quote Lenin, but he was right about one thing. They're useful idiots. Or there are people specifically causing it to happen. And so these people are either useful idiots or they're actually insurrectionists who want to see the destruction of the Judeo-Christian world, values, and what's left of it. And I wouldn't even say that America is a Judeo-Christian nation anymore, but it is to say that there are people that believe in the Judeo-Christian aspect of it, even if they're non-believers. They enjoy the freedoms. They enjoy how much the U.S. has been able to give, the freedom to speak and to build businesses. And of course, there's Christians, true Christians, and those are the ones that are being targeted. So you can go online and you can find many of these articles and find the video. Actually, you can go into the video. A lot of websites have the video of what happened at the prayer group at Berkeley. Now, this is related to this, and I don't usually try to tie too many things in terms of judgment and what's happening, but this one area, it's been quite evident for a long time. People have actually documented this, that whenever the U.S. meddles in and begins to come against Israel, God has a way of waking up the nation and steer it back in course. And of course, this has to do with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Kirchner has asked that they would give them 3 or 4 months to prepare for the peace plan. They're ready. They want to prepare this peace plan. Of course, every time this happens, and this is the interesting thing, there's a lot of spiritual things at work. Every time they're ready, something erupts in Israel, something erupts in Syria, and it delays it. Then the Muslims don't want to come to the table. Israel doesn't want to come to the table, and it just lingers and lingers and lingers. Now, they're pushing Israel for a two-state solution. There's no doubt about it. Kirchner has asked for basically to hold off, the Palestinians to hold off against any anti-Israel rhetoric right now while they work through the peace process. And as this is happening, same thing Bush did with Condoleezza Rice, and then we got Katrina. The Jews were taken out of Gaza, and Katrina moved right into that area. Jews were getting kicked out of their home. Americans were being forced out of their home by Katrina. And I don't know exactly what the peace plan would be, but there's something amidst here within the next 3 or 4 months that we'll be able to see it. Now, I mentioned last week that they're going to bring up the people in parliament from the Knesset in Israel to the Temple Mount to pray. Well, there was a large protest from the Muslim world and Jordanians who came to protest that they should not allow Israeli, not only the prime minister, but anybody from the Knesset to come to that Temple Mount because it belongs to Islam, and therefore Israelis and Palestinians should not share the Temple Mount because it's only been given to the Muslims. And so the Jordanian government accused the Israeli government of breaking the law or breaking their agreement, because Israel still has an agreement with Jordan and has an agreement with Egypt, and they believe that this is actually breaking some of their peace treaties that they have. But obviously, they don't really understand that for quite a long time, the Palestinians, Muslims, have done the same thing, if not worse. Macron has joined in his hand. Of course, this is the man who considers himself to be God, or Jupiter, one of the gods in the pantheon of the Greek mythology. And he calls on Israel to give up more land. And he wants to be a part of this peace process, and will continue to have efforts with the United Nations to find a two-state solution. Again, this is the same thing, two-state solution. Brings it up again. and then it goes away, and then it comes back again. Only the Lord's in charge of this. He will only let it go so far, and then it'll retreat again. But once it happens, and this is the interesting fact of what people would say, well, they've always been talking about a peace agreement. Look at Arafat, look at the Jordanians, look at the Arabs, look at the Egyptians, look at Jimmy Carter, look at Clinton, look at Reagan, look at Bush. It always is true. They've always have tried. Oslo, Camp David, Annapolis, they don't work. What it does establish is, though, it's a peace treaty of some sort, which the Bible speaks a lot about that. And what Daniel foresaw, Daniel sees a peace treaty of some sort, that it's enforced. It's not created, it's enforced. It's a peace treaty that's enforced. And we've always wondered, which one would it be? That's the tricky part. We don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new one. It could just simply be an old one that is brought forth to the front. So that's what makes it very confusing. If you study Daniel 9 properly, you will see that, hey, it doesn't have to be a new peace agreement. We get all excited about it. We think that this could be it. Actually, it doesn't really excite me. It actually frightens me sometimes to really think about the possibilities of what this could be. But nonetheless, Israel is in the center of the news. The Temple Mount belongs to the Muslims, clerics cried out. And of course, the UN, the US, France does nothing about it. All they ask is Israel to give up more land. Now, this is what I wanted to bring up. It's the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a very hateful group, similar to the ACLU. They're being sued by Christian ministries. The hard left is being challenged. Finally, Christian groups and family ministries have had enough of the Obama administration and what they were able to do, what the Southern Poverty Law Center was able to do, and ministries such as D. James Kennedy Ministry, AFA, are calling out the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, because they were labeled as hate groups. They were basically in their websites, they were saying that these ministries do certain things and they're far from it. So they not only they lie, but they disgrace, they ridicule, they contempt against Christian ministries, and these are larger ministries. The false and illegal characterizations, they said, has a chilling effect of free exercise of religion and a religious speech for all people of all faith. So they are bringing a lawsuit to defend the religious freedoms. And don't think that the Southern Poverty Law Center is going to stand still. They're going to fight back, and it's going to continue. But the big fight right now is for free speech, religious freedom, and the attack on conservatives and the attack on Christians in America. Sounds odd. It's not the same in the Middle East or in the southern places that are completely attacked. Christians are being persecuted, but it's beginning to come up. The Southern Poverty Law Center, again, they're on their website. They warn of turmoil and bloodshed because they're identifying on a map on their website mainstream conservative organizations as hate groups, and they have a hate map. This was inspired a terrorist attack in 2012 when somebody went into, I forget the name of the Christian ministry, I can't remember right now, and shot one of their security guards. And the guy who shot the security guard said that he was inspired by the Southern Poverty Law Center because it claimed that the Christian groups were anti-homosexuals, Nazis, anti-Muslims, and therefore it was his duty to shoot up the place. But the map includes towns, cities, counties, even middle schools that bear the names of Confederate generals. So they're using the hate map to confuse the people to say, we're only going after fascists, we're only going after Confederates. So obviously these names of middle schools that are named after generals from the Confederate states, they've been long dead. None of those kids probably know who those people are. Yet they're being targeted, cities, counties, middle schools, even ministries, to let people know these are hateful groups. And of course, you can see where it is. Mainly it's in the South. and very little in California, huh? Interesting, huh? I can tell you a couple of things, but anyway. This is another interesting thing that is happening in England, and this is something that will someday happen here, I would imagine, is foster parents, Christian kids, what they consider Christian kids, is quite a large spectrum, are being given over to Muslim families. And we said, what's wrong with that? Well, these Muslims families are very much orthodox in their beliefs, so they wear not only hijabs, but they wear burqas. They force the kids to learn Arabic, to do the Muslim prayers, the shahad, and all the things that they would convert somebody into a Muslim. This 5-year-old girl, native English speaker, family believe that they're Christians, so were put. They were taken from their family. Now it's not exactly sure why she was taken away. But she was put into a foster home with Muslim parents, and she's forced to learn Arabic and to identify her as a Muslim. So her mother said to be horrified by the culture and religious and linguistic environment her daughter has spent the last 6 months. If this was a Muslim girl in a Christian home, even though she would be loved and taken care of and taught about Jesus, they would have a lawsuit. I mean, you wouldn't even close the door before the ACLU and Southern Poverty Law Center would be at the door taking her away and saying Christians were trying to defame Islam and all these things, but Islam could do it. It's a double standard that has happened. In San Diego, which is one of the most very liberal, very radical liberal public school systems in California, if you could believe that, they have adopted an anti-bullying for quite a long time already. This is not new. For Islam, meaning that if you speak against Islam, if you disagree with Islam, you're Islamophobe, and you're not be tolerated, and therefore you will be a bully. Now the school has gone out of their way to make sure that Muslim kids they don't have to participate because they need prayer time, so they can't be called on during their prayer time, so they don't have to take a test. They can miss the days at the holidays. They can, Ramadan, they're basically off limits. On and on, no pork, nothing on the menu for Muslims and things like that. So they have totally catered to, and of course they've been working with CAIR, C-A-I-R. And we know this, we know the slogan, they don't care. They work with Muslim groups and mosques, and they've been found to be working with terrorist groups. These are not opinions, these are facts that have been found, donating to terrorist groups or people that work with terrorist groups. So they wanted to implement Sharia law in the schools. And the parents of the children that did not like it.
Agenda public testimony speakers. I'm going to call your name and you've got 1 minute.
Good evening, Mary Baker with Citizens for Quality Education. I'm here again to urgently request that the district rescind the discriminatory anti-bullying policy specifically crafted for Muslim students. This policy disproportionately serves Muslim students and casts aside other students who face severe bullying in equal or greater measure because of their religion, gender, disability, or sexual preference. Both the FBI and DOJ studies continue to report year after year that Jews are by far the biggest targets of religious hate crimes in the United States. This policy favors one religion, Islam, over all others. It is not the role of a government entity, such as a public school, to promote religion. It violates the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which prohibits unduly favoring one religion over another. In fact, collaboration with CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, raises questions of impermissible, excessive government entanglement with religion. And for these reasons, I ask you that you rescind the policy.
Thank you.
What's up, guys? I'm here to finish what I had to say last time. My name's Christopher Wyrick. The students deserve a good education that we as citizens pay for. You as board members are supposed to make these decisions based on your constituents' input. Ultimately, you have decided that funding an irrelevant and absurd policy based on religious belief is more important than retaining teachers and school programs that could be the key to the future Beethoven, Mozart, Einstein, or even Stephen Hawking. Tons of missed opportunities into retaining quality teachers due to misappropriated fundings. Your priorities are way off base, and you should be ashamed of yourself for putting yourself and politics before the children. Kids don't care what, who, or when, or why. They just want to play and learn occasionally. Their minds are like blank pages, and your decision is to write their own ideological book for them. That's the parents' job to teach them those things, not the public school system. I am calling on this board to immediately remove this literature from all San Diego schools as it is an obvious violation of practicing any religious beliefs in public schools. Immediately disavow and remove any work with care from any and all public school curriculum. We also need an immediate review of any funding to a program that are in direct violation of federal law that prevents a bias towards certain religions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Refocus the taxpayers' dollars to things that will help the children succeed when they grow up. Give them pride in themselves, their community, and quit trying to make everyone a victim of society.
Okay,
we don't need Islamophobia taught in our schools. We need education and free will to guide us. We're wasting our money, our time, and our minds of the youth. This is a ridiculous plan.
Thank you.
If you're going to teach Islam in the schools, I just want to make sure that you teach the true Islam.
Can we just have your name, please? I'm sorry.
Roger Ogden.
Thank you.
And not a falsified Islam that has been approved by CARE. And Muslims teach that Muhammad is the perfect moral example for Muslims to follow, like Christians follow Christ and Buddhists follow Buddha. But the problem is that Muhammad was not a moral person. He beheaded hundreds of people because they did not accept Islam. He waged aggressive war against non-Muslims. He used terror tactics against non-Muslims. He raided caravans to pay for his wars. He engaged in sex slavery. He married a woman after he had beheaded her husband. And he had sex with children. He married a 6-year-old girl and has sex with her when she's 9. And this is in the Muslim literature. And these board members are the bullies.
Okay, thank you.
And I think you should go educate yourself what real Islam is about.
Thanks very much. Okay, if I called your name, please step forward.
Hi, my name is Christy. I could spend all day talking about how CARE has proven ties to Hamas, but since I know those facts don't concern the district, and because I know everyone here is going to brush me off as some right-wing Islamophobe, I'll spend the few minutes I have talking about something that everyone should be concerned about: the separation of church and state in the public school system. According to CARE's website, its mission is to enhance the understanding of Islam. If I wanted to enhance my children's understanding of Islam, I would bring them to a mosque. If I wanted to enhance my children's understanding of the Bible, I'd take them to Christian school. I send them to public school. I want them to learn reading, writing, arithmetic in an environment free from religion entirely. And the fact that parents are concerned and that school board isn't concerned, that's ridiculous, because the school talks about tolerance and understanding, and then they tweet snarky, intolerant statements like, quote, "Unfortunate to see some people feeling so threatened and angered by our curriculum without knowing what's actually in it. No place for hate, hashtag." But if the district is going to publicly criticize concerned parents for not knowing the curriculum, perhaps the district needs to be more transparent.
Thank you very much.
But transparency isn't something the district has lacked for it's something they've lacked for quite some time.
We're going to have to ask you to step aside, please, so other people can speak. Thank you.
Well, this is basically opening up the door for indoctrination of our children. This is public school, and religion should not be in this.
Thank you.
CARE has actually been on record.
Thank you.
CARE has been on record saying, fighting plans just like this, saying separation of church and state is unconstitutional. So why can't we? It's the same legal argument.
Let the next person speak. Thank you.
You all know I'm right.
Well, she does have a lot of guts, more than most pastors, and she's able to tell the truth, especially that gentleman that did it as well. But this is an ongoing fight, and this was back in May, and we'll be able to see what the school system is, the school district is going to do. And but it's happening all over the United States. San Diego is just one of the most radical ones, but California has adopted a lot of those. Switching gears to Korea, and this is a interesting article because finally an article that I found where they actually linked the connection between North Korea and Iran. And I was actually kind of happy about this. By the way, if you wanted the video, I forgot to mention, of the school district, because then they allow the Muslims to speak after that. So it's about 27 minutes. I couldn't show it here, otherwise we'll take the whole time. If you would like it, I can send it to you, or maybe we'll put it up on our Facebook page or something like that. But if you want it for yourself, I have it. I can send it to you. It's free. So find it on YouTube as well. So back to the article. North Korea has launched a missile over Japan this week, and Japan is very concerned. In fact, even Putin has removed about I think it's 150,000 of Russians from the border between North Korea and Russia. So yes, Russia does border North Korea. And this article was talking about the fact that these countries, although they're different societies, they have one ideology, and that is they hate the West, they hate Israel, and they want to be considered as a nuclear power. Of course, one is an atheistic state and one is a Muslim state, and yet they're intricately linked because of nuclear weapons. And it's an example that many people don't want to go down the road, because North Korea was allowed and continue to be allowed to not only receive but empower their nuclear capabilities. We gave Iran so much money to do it, and they're both positioning themselves to do something about it. And Israel, the IDF, is very concerned. This is from the IDF military intelligence, and who basically are doing several studies on how to prevent this from happening, but also how to fight two different wars and two different ends, because Israel, it is concerned that North Korea would move toward them if something were to happen with Iran. And so it's a fascinating thing, because both have been developing nuclear weapons at the same time. Both were helped by the U.S., by the way, at the same time. And so I'm not exactly saying that we've been innocent about this, but it is to say that we could be reaping the rewards of something so stupid to give them nuclear capabilities. From Clinton to Obama, and allowing them to build it, of course, has been absolutely, has backfired. Even Kerry still comes out every once in a while, Secretary of State under Obama, to say that it was a good deal. It was a good thing. And, they haven't thrown one yet. They haven't blown up anything, so why are we afraid? Again, it's the leftist idea. Because it hasn't been done, that means it's good. Once it happens, then it's bad. So how do you know they would do it? It reminded me of in San Francisco, they wanted to stop drug addicts on the streets shooting themselves. So they said, well, the best thing to do, instead of putting them in rehab, instead of giving them an opportunity to get right and leave the drugs, they give them clean needles, because you can't help them get off those drugs. So might as well be safe drugs. So let them have safe drugs, safe needles, clean needles to get high. And that, again, is adopted by Planned Parenthood and all those things, where it says, we can't stop people from having illicit sexual activities, even if it's, even if it's rampant and it's killing you, but we just want you to make sure you're safe. And and if you do make a mistake, our former president, Obama, called kids mistakes, because he didn't want his kids to be punished with a baby. That's what his words were. And that, hey, you can always go Planned Parenthood and take care of it, like you would take care of any biological health needs. Hamas and Hezbollah are linking themselves even more to Iran. So this is, remember I said last week that in the midst of all this chaos, Iran is sort of just laying in the weeds. No one's talking about it. And yet, this is what Daniel the prophet saw, the prince of Persia, strengthening up for the battle at hand. Ezekiel saw the same thing. Ezekiel saw Persia coming in from the north. These again are these are pictures of missile testings from North Korea, and of course these are things that are happening very, very quickly. And we have not responded yet of any of sort, even after the missile went over Japan. I believe the president, the dictator of North Korea, said that this was just a test, just a test to make sure that Guam is still within reach, is what he said. Guam was still within reach. So anyway, let's continue on because we got to finish. This is the head of the UN chief, Mr. Antonio Gutierrez. And Mr. Antonio Gutierrez says the best thing to do is to open up Jerusalem to a place of all three religions and let them build what they consider a holy city. But in order for Israel to be safe, we need to have a peace agreement. So he is all for the building of religious sites. He didn't say this, but you can kind of read between the lines. Building religious sites in Israel means a temple. He's very careful about what he has to say because otherwise Muslims will jump on him. At the same time, he gave the Israeli-Palestinian peace treaty his go and his thumbs up to be pursued. And of course, he wants to see this done within this year or next year. I don't know where his term ends as UN chief, but he certainly would like to see it before his term ends. California will be the first state to have a gender X on their birth certificate or identification. It's called SB 179. SB 179. Basically, it gives non-binary status to people that don't want to check male or female. Now, what's fascinating about this is prior to the 1990s, there was no real scientist who ever said that gender is what you think. No one ever said it. In fact, it's humorous, but it's really silly. Bill Nye, everybody know Bill Nye, the science guy? Okay, he had a show back in the 90s, and he's been called out for his hypocrisy, because in the 90s, he had several of his shows that stated, what makes you male, what makes you female? It actually was one of the titles for his show. What makes you a man, what makes you a woman? What makes you a boy, what makes you a girl? That's actually what he said. And he said, chromosomes. Undeniable chromosomes. He just had a picture, where you guys studied it, where it divides and it goes XY, okay, XX, XY, XX is a girl, XY is a boy. You have the random mutations of XYY, things like that. But for the most part, that's what made you a boy, that's what made you a girl, anatomically, biologically, genetically. Now Mr. Nye has a show, which is absurd, but it's on Netflix, not that anybody wants to see it, which was, they edited that video that he had about the XY chromosome, or XX chromosome, and now he says it's how you feel about yourself. So California has adopted that if you feel different than what your license says, then how can they discriminate you? And so you should be able to put anything on it, but they have resolved to have an X, a non-binary gender, on all forms of state identification, birth certificate, school ID. I don't know if the school ID says male or female, but maybe some of them do. So this is the gentleman. He is from San Francisco. I didn't write his name. Yes, I did. Scott Weiner. Scott Weiner. Well, Scott Weiner from San Francisco. I won't say what I was thinking. Of course, San Francisco, right? He has come up with the SB 79 legislation that he introduced it last week, that would seek the imprisonment of healthcare workers that willfully and repeatedly failed to use the resident's preferred name or pronoun. So he's seeking punishment for somebody in the health, this is only healthcare workers, it may include social workers, but healthcare workers who don't want to and refuse to refer to those individuals as other than male or female, as they want to be identified. If you refuse to, you would be fined and imprisonment. So this is what they're after. There's nothing else but fascism. They're the real fascists, but that's how California, it's going. Now, Oregon has an interesting one. Under driver's license, they don't have to put a sex. They don't have to put anything. Just, you're free. You're nothing. You don't have to put anything. Who are you? New York has 57 pronouns. And anyway, times in which we live in. One more video and then we're done. And this is, somebody had asked me this last week about what's the deal with Zionism, what's the deal with Israel, what's the deal with why are people anti-Zionist, why are people anti-Israel, aren't the Jews bad because they control Hollywood, they control the banks and all this stuff. And it's like, well, it's not as simple as that sounds. I know there's all kinds of theories about how terrible Jews are and things like that. However, there are bad Jews and they're good Jews, just like there's bad Hispanics and they're good Hispanics. It all depends on which spectrum you see it. However, we do know one thing. In the land of Israel, even Jews hate them. Jews in America many of them hate the land of Israel. They don't want it. They hated it. They hated it from the beginning, 1948. They never wanted a state of Israel. Now the rabbis want to control it, even though they hated them. In fact, the people that founded Israel, David Ben-Gurion and all these guys, they were atheists. They didn't even believe in their own Judaism. You know, what I said is, when I tell people, I said, that's the amazing thing about it. God even used atheists to bring about his word. He said he would bring the Jews back. And he didn't even use rabbis because they were so against Israel. He had to use a bunch of atheists who just wanted socialism and communism. That's really collectivism. That's really all why they wanted Israel. And Russia, of course, was very much willing to vote for a communist state in Israel. So this video, I found this video. I think it's very interesting. It's about 4 minutes long, so this will be a final one. If you want a copy of this, I can send it to you. You can get a hold of it. It explains very well, from a Jewish perspective, why are people anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist. Of course, there could be similar terms, although the term anti-Semitic could be a wider term. But it certainly means people that are against the Jewish people that live in the land of Israel, that narrow strip of land by the Mediterranean. So it is from Global Jewish Channel, and they had some interesting videos there. So if you wanted to take a look at them.
Let's talk about anti-Zionism and why it's a form of anti-Semitism. I'm not saying anti-Zionism can cross over into anti-Semitism, or that it's often expressed in anti-Semitic language, which it is. I'm saying anti-Zionism is inherently, essentially, necessarily anti-Semitic. In fact, it's the most powerful mutation of that ancient virus today. Let's recap. Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination in the land of Israel. At minimum, and I'm being generous, it's the case that the state of Israel has the right to continue to exist. Anti-Zionism is the ideology that says Israel has no right to exist, that it shouldn't exist. It's not criticism of Israel, it's the negation of Israel. Applied practically, anti-Zionism is the movement that strives to use political, economic, and moral pressure to wipe the Jewish nation-state off the map and replace it with what would inevitably be an Arab-majority Palestine. So why is anti-Zionism a manifestation of anti-Semitism? 1. Anti-Zionism seeks to forcibly dispossess Jews of a fundamental right that they already enjoy as Jews, the right to self-determination. Anti-Zionism doesn't say that nation-states shouldn't exist, it says the Jewish nation-state shouldn't exist. But Israel isn't an abstract idea, it's a real place. It's the place where Jews from around the world have resurrected their ancient Hebrew language and rejuvenated their historic, indigenous culture. Anti-Zionism says Jews alone should be stripped of their internationally recognized right to a space where their distinctive culture can flourish. That's anti-Semitism. 2. Anti-Zionism necessarily fails to treat Jews as political equals. Zionism isn't a form of supremacy, it's a demand for basic political equality for Jews as a nation. But anti-Zionism is a demand that Jews alone, having secured their national freedom, should be forcibly subordinated to other majorities. It's the demand that Jews should become permanent minorities again, despite that tragic history. Anti-Zionists tell Jews they can only be treated as equals on the anti-Zionist terms, with their collective rights revoked. It's an assertion of political supremacy over Jews. That's anti-Semitism. 3. Anti-Zionism exposes Jews to dangers for which the anti-Zionists have no answer. For millennia, the Jews have faced persecution. In the 20th century, fascist, communist, and Arab regimes around the world turned on their Jews, while liberal democracies denied them safe haven. Most Jews realized that the best or only way to survive was to take responsibility for their own fate, to build their own democratic state. That's Zionism. It brought Jews to their ancient homeland from countries in which they weren't wanted. Anti-Zionism says the Jews aren't wanted in Israel either and can't be the guarantors of their own existence there. But if Israel were to disappear, the Jewish people would lose their most successful self-defense mechanism ever. Anti-Zionism necessarily disregards the beliefs, the agency, and the aspirations of most of the world's Jews. That's anti-Semitism. You see, anti-Semitism was never just a prejudice against Jews like other forms of racism. It was a totalistic political ideology that mobilized societies against the Jews, that treated them as an irredeemable problem to be solved. And that's exactly what anti-Zionism is about. It's not criticism. It's a hateful, totalistic, destructive ideology. Zionism was born as a revolutionary movement to breathe life into the Jewish people. The founder of the anti-Israel BDS movement says he favors Israel's euthanasia. Choose Zionism. Choose life.
It's an interesting video. And one of the things that I would say, not only anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, which is really similar terms to not wanting Israel to be in the land, not wanting Jews to be in the land. And of course, the church doesn't fall too far behind from those ideologies. We have a deadly theology in the church called replacement theology, where it attributes the rejection of Christ as the final destination for Jews, that they are irredeemable and no longer in the plan of God, despite the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, despite the promises, even what we'll see today from Micah and the prophets. It seeks to displace Israel and put the church as the only people that God cares for, despite the promises that even Jesus said about those who would call on his name prior to his return. Despite the prophecies of Zechariah, the church has sought out to seek their own blessings and put all the curses on Israel. I've met even people that were believers, godly people, that would say Israel has nothing to do with prophecy. Israel has nothing to do with the end times. It's only the church, and only God cares for the church. And that has infected the body of Christ tremendously. In fact, if you don't believe that, you're the minority within the church. And I use the church in a broad setting. I mean, I'm talking about denominations who have gone extremely liberal, like the Presbyterians and Episcopalians. And of course, on the other side, you saw some of the references to the Catholic Church there, where they've always been anti-Semitic, they've always been anti-Jews. And so when Israel came in the land, brought forth by the plan of God, even using atheists to bring them into the promised land, it signals something to Christians. It signals that God is getting ready to reveal himself to the Jewish people. And he's putting them in the land for the recognition of their Messiah. But the Bible also warns the fact that if they rejected it, they continue to reject, and it sees and it foresees in advance that the Jews are going to end up making a treaty with Antichrist. It foresees it. God doesn't want it, but it foretells it as if something is going to happen. But it has a remnant. God has a remnant of the Jewish people who would believe. Many of them won't believe. Well, same as the nations, same as the Gentiles. Most of them won't believe. And people make a case, oh, Israel rejected Jesus. I said, well, the church has rejected Jesus a long time ago. Well, the church, Israel has always been, they've always rejected God. Yeah, that's true. Look at Moses. Look at the time of Joshua. There have always been a few who would believe. Always been few who would believe. And just because in their past they disbelieve or rejected, just because in their present time they are rejecting the gospel, they'll never make the mistake that that's going to be their future state. Just because they're past and present, they're in a state of unbelief, it doesn't mean their future state would be unbelief. Paul the Apostle tells us that's not the case. And it says the deliverer will come out of Zion, and all of Israel will be saved. Those who would believe and repent will see Yeshua, will see Jesus. But Paul says that it will happen at the time of the end. God will bring back the natural branches back into that olive tree. Now, I believe what the Bible says. I have no doubt it's going to happen. And I happen to be very fortunate in my lifetime to see what God has told through the prophets, that before Jesus came, or comes a second time, the Jews will be back in the land. And they'll continue to go back to that land, and they will finally see their Messiah. But under tremendous pressures and tremendous difficulties, 2/3 will die, will perish, whether it's in Jerusalem or outside of Jerusalem. It's not clear in Zechariah, but 2/3 of Jews in that land will die. They'll perish because of their rejection of Jesus and their hatred of other nations coming to attack them. But God will redeem that 1/3, and he'll bring them through the fire and refine them like silver is refined, like gold is refined. But you know, as Christians, we have to look at something very interesting. Everywhere that they've persecuted Jews, they've also persecuted Christians. And our future as the Church of Jesus Christ, it's intricately tied together with the Jewish people. It's like the two sides of a coin. You look at one coin, it's the Jews. You look at the other side, it's the church. It's always been together. The Romans, the Nazis, the Russians, communism, Islam have always persecuted two people all the time. And if they're persecuting the Jews and they hate the Jews, they're also going to be persecuting Christians. And I would say the two people that are most hated in the world today are Jews and Christians. And so the Jews are coming to Christ. They're coming to faith. Tremendous movements within Israel. And that's what we have to pray for them, because the Bible commands us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, to pray for the Jews. Israel as a state has a lot of problems, just like us. Liberal to the core, atheists incredibly, homosexual rights, LGBT, it just goes on and on. They promote homosexuality. One of the biggest parades in the world is in Tel Aviv. Abortion through the roof. Yet, for the sake of the fathers, for the sake of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God has not casted his people off. He has a promise to keep. And the Messiah has a date with them in the future. And if any nation, any state gets in the way, it'll be like a burdensome stone, Zechariah said. Those who try to deal with it will suffer tremendously. Why? Because God has a dilemma. It has a controversy with Israel. But the nations come in and try to disrupt that which God is trying to do. And God is not very happy when the nations of the world disrupt his plan for his people. And you see the repercussions and the results of it. So anyway, let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we see, Lord, how you're intricately involved in the nations, in the world, and with your people, both the Jewish people that have rejected you, Lord, you have not rejected them, and the bride of Christ, the Gentile church, Jews and Christians as well, that are in that body. Lord, we're so thankful that in it you are working all things out for your purpose. And you have told us your purpose is that you won Jew and Gentile together in the body of Messiah. Lord, I pray that the Jews will come to know you, that you would open their eyes, Lord, that partial hardening would just be partial, and that they would come to see before their biggest hour, before their darkest hour. And same for the church, Lord. There's so many in the church that are so blind, that are so lost. And we need, Lord, for you to open their eyes to the reality of Jesus. We ask these things in his name. Amen. Amen, amen, amen. All right. We'll swap.